I know amongst all the madness this week of various issues, there was a confection, a concoction of a sort of controversy, which would suggest, run by Radio New Zealand News, which all emanates around a particular book. I know it's weird, but there you go. And that book is called At the Marae, which is one of those early readers books that kids are given in their early years in school, what, sort of 0 to 3, 0 to 4, probably 0 to 2 actually, looking at it, at which you learn to read, basically. You remember Jack and Jill and all those sorts of things that my older generation did. Well, you get the simple words in your memory, and it's about, learning to read, basically. Well, one of those books was a book called At the Marae, and for some strange and ungodly reason, it has become a cause célèbre and proof positive, according to Radio New Zealand, a large number of education commentators and academics, of the government's anti-Māori agenda. In fact, as of yesterday, Radio New Zealand was reporting that Education Minister Erica Stanford has imposed a near total ban, quote unquote, on Māori and new additions to a series of books used to teach 5-year-olds to read. Oh, so it's year one then, okay. An Education Ministry report shows Stanford decided in October last year to exclude all Māori words except for characters' names from any new books in the Education Ministry's ready-to-read Phonics Plus series. And the paper showed the decision was driven by concern that Māori words were confusing for children learning to read English, although evidence of that was mixed, reports Radio New Zealand. The Minister has defended her position. She said, "In the end, I reached a middle position after taking conflicting advice on this particular issue." But essentially her argument was, well, if you're learning to read English, don't confuse me. Just read English. And this particular book at the Marae, was a sort of combination of English and Maori words. So instead of using that as a future primer, they're going to do it as a big picture book or something so that the teacher can read it and introduce it if they wish to anyhow. But I know, it's sort of cause celeb gone throughout the education environment. Proof positive in terms of media coverage of this, that the government has an anti-Māori agenda. To discuss that and how kids learn, and is this all just, well, frankly, a storm in a teacup, gosh, not even a teacup, a thimble, we are joined by Professor of Education, Professor Elizabeth Rata, and she joins us now. Professor Rata, Elizabeth, great to have you on again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, morning, Michael.
You heard my introduction. You know all about literacy. I don't. All I know is that as a parent and as a recipient of those books, I learned, I guess, have they changed much over the generation from when I went to school to today?
Yes, there was a huge change from the 90s, but what I'd actually like to do, Michael, is go to the nub of the issue, which is when 5-year-olds, 4 or 5-year-olds learn to read, what they do is they put the sound together with the letter. Now, can I give you the most brilliant example from some time ago? I'm not going to give you the date till I've read just a very short extract about P and B, P and B. Can I do that?
Go for your life.
It will give a great example. Okay, it's from a book written by a teacher of infant classes who has written the book for other teachers. And what she wants to teach the sounds P and B and corresponding to the letters. And it's within what she's using the nature method, and the lesson is all about onions for. But anyway, let me get to the main point, which is the correspondence of the sound to the letter. Okay, so I'll read from the book. Teachers produce a pair of bellows and says, how do the bellows take in air? We will breathe through our noses. 2, hands on ribs, mouths closed, ready, in, out. The children stand firmly on both feet and do this exercise several times while a boy works the bellows in front of the class. The lesson turns to sounding the letters P and B. B is bulb. The theme of the lesson is onion bulbs. So B is bulb compared to P in pipe. Children tell how the lips move harder for B than for P. They put fingers to throat and tell that B is started there. Teacher corrects any tacking on of a vowel sound to P or B. Now, that lesson was from, wait for it, 1911.
Mm.
And this is how children were taught to read, which is why we had many generations of New Zealand children, most of whom could read 5, 6 years old. And this was the phonics method used. So it's about the integrity of the correspondence between the sound and the letter. And Minister Stanford is absolutely right in what she's doing. For very young children learning to read, they don't want to be confused by the fact that, A or P or whatever sound could it could relate to a number of different letters. So if you're being taught to read in English, then stick to the sound letter correspondence. If you're being taught to read in Māori, do exactly the same thing. Māori sounds and corresponding to the letters. So it is a storm in a teacup. You're absolutely right.
Okay, so as I understand what you're saying is it's not the words actually so much as the sounding of the words and how they're put together. You're teaching at year one and year two,
Yeah, it's the
and that
correspondence, so it's the
Maori has
sound.
a yeah,
Mm.
and Maori has a different sound or a different way of expressing a particular word or a consonant, if you like, than English, and you could confuse the kids if you put the two together. Is that right?
That's right. It's really difficult to learn to read. When you think about it, a child has to understand that a sound actually corresponds. That squiggle on the page is is the sound, is the symbol of the sound. Now, it's really hard for children. So let's make it as clear as possible for them and say, here's the sound and here's the letter that corresponds to the sound. And as this teacher in 1911 did, she made it very clear that the B sound corresponds to the B in the word bulb, and she has a whole lot of onion bulbs to demonstrate to the children. But she's also getting them to know, to understand that sounds come from our breathing, from our lungs, and that we can control the way we produce sounds. So it was a lesson in speech training, actually.
Okay. Having said that, there is a great deal of pushback from also educators and those involved in the learning or in the yes, the literacy area. The head of the Māori Principals Association describes removing these texts at this point in time for the year one, year two, as our members see this move as an act of white supremacy. It's an act of racism. Then you've got Better Start, founder Gail Gillan, who also Better Start Literacy Approach, said discontinuing the reader version of At the Marae was a very odd decision. Professor Gillan, she's a professor of English as well, I see, although I'm not quite sure at which university. And then you've got the book's author, University of Canterbury Senior Lecturer in Māori Education, Jen Smith, saying she was incredibly sad and disappointed because she wanted to see Māori children to see their culture reflected in their readers. Te reo Māori was absent from my own literacy learning. You're saying they've got the wrong end of the stick, basically.
Yes, I find it really difficult to understand what their argument really is because it's the minister is not removing Māori words from children's education. She's just saying when you're at this very beginning stage of learning to read, then it's important that the sound letter correspondence is established in the child's mind. Now, that's very reasonable. I support it completely. And then, of course, in subsequent years, then there are a number of Māori words that have moved organically into English. As we know, English borrows from so many languages, and children will encounter that. They will also, perhaps, if they are in bilingual classes, learn to read in Māori as well. But we've got to respect the integrity of languages. If you just start throwing a whole lot of words from one language into another language and it's done really quickly, following the Maihi Karuna policy document of the previous Labour coalition, which was put in place from the beginning of 2019, where government departments and the education system was instructed to include as much Māori language as possible in the public service and in education. What we saw was many, many Māori words being thrown into English. Now, if you're committed to the revival of the Māori language, that's not the way to do it. What you do is you ensure that you teach Māori as a language in its own right, with its own grammar, its own vocabulary. The conversation will be all in Māori. You just don't throw a whole lot of Māori words into another language and say this will revive the Māori language. But that's another issue. But the one we're talking about is, how do children learn to read? Well, they begin to learn to read by connecting the sound to the letter. So let's make
Listen,
that as clear as possible for them. That's what's happening.
yesterday on my show, I had another professor of education, this time from Otago University, Professor Alex Robb. Was it Rob? I think, Josh. Sorry, it was anyhow. Talking about critical theory, but putting that to one side, one of the things that she made a point was that I was saying that there was a lack of confidence in the graduates that were coming out of universities in particular, and that they weren't ready. Many principals have been on the show to tell me that they weren't ready to go to the classroom yet, that they had been insufficiently trained for the practicalities of. Can I just, I mean, just, I'd be interested to get your response to that. In your view, are the universities training teachers who can teach properly literacy in our classrooms and are ready to do so from the moment that they graduate?